6. Hidden powers that emerge when you're completely alone. Sometimes God removes everyone from your path not to punish you, but to show you the power you never knew you had. Part 1. The loneliness that awakens the self. When everything around you grows quiet and no one seems to stand beside you, something profound begins to happen within. According to Carl Jung, loneliness is not merely the absence of people, but the confrontation with one's own soul. It's the moment when external noise fades and the psyche begins to reveal what has long been suppressed beneath the surface of consciousness. Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the sacred process through which the self differentiates itself from the collective patterns of society. For most of us, the early stages of isolation feel unbearable. We have been conditioned to measure our worth through validation, to see ourselves reflected in other people's eyes. When those mirrors disappear, panic sets in. The ego, deprived of its audience, begins to crumble, yet Jung believed that this crumbling is essential. The breakdown of external attachment is the initiation into psychological maturity. Only when the outer scaffolding collapses can we discover the structure that has been quietly forming within the architecture of the true self. In Jungian psychology, every period of solitude is a descent into the unconscious. This descent is not a punishment, it's an inner pilgrimage. The loneliness you feel is not empty space, it is the womb of transformation. Within it all, your forgotten emotions, neglected dreams, and denied aspects of personality begin to stir. You start to notice that beneath your loneliness lies a quiet intelligence, a guiding force that is trying to pull you toward authenticity. Jung described this force as the self, the organizing center of the psyche that strives for wholeness. What makes loneliness terrifying is that it strips away illusion. Without the comfort of external approval, you begin to see who you really are. You face your fears, your dependency, your unhealed wounds. Jung once said loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. This is the loneliness of the awakened mind, when your consciousness outgrows the collective patterns that once made you feel safe. You no longer fit into superficial conversations or social performances. You crave truth, depth, and meaning, things that cannot be found in the marketplace of popularity. The world often punishes those who seek authenticity. Society is built upon conformity. It rewards imitation and fears originality. When you start listening to your inner voice, you naturally drift away from the collective rhythm. This detachment can feel like exile, but Jung saw it as liberation. The individual who dares to stand alone must face what Jung called the night sea journey, a symbolic voyage through darkness where the ego dies so that the self can be reborn. Every mythic hero faces this trial. Christ in the desert, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Moses in the wilderness. Their solitude was not abandonment, it was the necessary silence in which revelation occurs. From a depth psychology perspective, loneliness acts as an amplifier of the unconscious. When you are constantly surrounded by others, your psychic energy disperses outward. But when you are alone, that energy turns inward, feeding dreams, symbols, and intuition. You begin to notice synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that reflect the dialogue between your inner world and the outer world. Jung believed these events were signs that the self is guiding you even in solitude. They remind you that your path, though lonely, is not random. It is orchestrated by the deeper intelligence of your psyche. Many people attempt to escape this loneliness through distractions, social media, relationships, busyness, entertainment. But these are merely ways to silence the psyche's call. Jung warned that when you avoid your solitude, the unconscious retaliates through anxiety, depression, or inner emptiness. What you refuse to face in silence eventually forces you to listen through suffering. Therefore, to be alone is to practice inner listening. It's learning to discern between the ego's noise and the soul's whisper. In Jung's model of the psyche, there are two movements, one toward adaptation to the outer world and another toward the realization of the inner world. Most of society encourages the first, how to fit in, how to succeed, how to be liked. But individuation requires the second, how to align with your inner truth, even if it isolates you. The shift from outer adaptation to inner authenticity is the exact point where loneliness becomes a teacher. In this stillness, you begin to sense your purpose, not as something you must chase, but as something that unfolds naturally when you stop pretending. The people who learn to thrive in solitude are those who discover the difference between isolation and aloneness. Isolation is the ego's wound, it says. No one wants me. Aloneness is the soul's state, it says. I am with myself. Jung would say that psychological health depends on transforming isolation into aloneness. When you can sit with your pain without needing it to vanish, you start building a relationship with your unconscious. And from that relationship, creativity, intuition, and strength emerge. Think of it as moving from dependency to sovereignty. When you no longer need others to validate your existence, you gain what Jung called inner authority. This is not arrogance, but alignment, a sense of knowing who you are, even when no one else sees it. You stop asking for permission to exist. You stop apologizing for your depth. You understand that the very sensitivity that once made you feel alienated is the same sensitivity that allows you to perceive what others cannot. Your loneliness becomes your vision. In Jungian terms, solitude reactivates the archetype of the hermit, the wise old man or woman who withdraws from society not out of bitterness, but out of devotion to truth. The hermit symbolizes introspection, discernment, and self-reliance. When this archetype is active within you, you stop fearing silence because you realize it holds more wisdom than noise. You begin to trust the slow rhythms of your inner life, understanding that what grows in darkness often blooms with the most radiant light. However, the ego resists this transformation. It wants connection, recognition, and comfort. That's why many people collapse under loneliness. They identify too strongly with the part of themselves that depends on others for identity. Jung emphasized that the ego must be humbled, not destroyed. Solitude humbles the ego by showing it that it is not the center of existence, but a fragment of a larger self. Once the ego accepts its limitations, it becomes a vessel for something greater, consciousness itself. Loneliness also exposes the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. In relationships, we often wear masks, the persona, to meet social expectations. But when no one is around to mirror these masks, they lose their purpose. You are forced to meet yourself without disguise. This confrontation can be painful, even humiliating. You realize how much of your life has been shaped by fear of rejection. Yet Jung insisted that this moment of naked honesty is sacred. It's when the false self dissolves, making space for authenticity to arise. In solitude, you begin to notice the duality within you, the part that fears being unseen and the part that longs for truth more than approval. As this tension grows, the unconscious begins to reveal compensatory symbols, dreams of light in darkness, journeys through forests or climbing mountains. These are not random. They are expressions of your psyche's inner movement toward wholeness. Jung believed that when you interpret these symbols, you strengthen your dialogue with the self, turning loneliness into revelation. Over time, the silence that once felt suffocating begins to nourish you. You develop emotional stamina. You no longer chase attention. You attract resonance. You no longer seek belonging outside. You embody belonging within. Your relationships, once built on fear of abandonment, evolve into conscious connections grounded in mutual growth. You stop demanding from others what you have learned to give yourself presence, patience, understanding. The irony of solitude is that once you embrace it, you are never truly alone again. You discover an inner companion, the self, that observes, guides, and comforts you through every experience. This presence is not imaginary. It's the most real part of you. Jung often wrote that when a person learns to relate to the self, they experience a kind of spiritual companionship that transcends human validation. It is what mystics have called the inner Christ, the Buddha nature, or the divine spark. Whatever the name, its essence is the same, the eternal witness within you. The process of awakening through loneliness is gradual and cyclical. There will be moments of despair when you question the purpose of it all. There will be nights when silence feels unbearable, but each descent into darkness refines your soul. Jung compared this to alchemy, the ancient art of turning lead into gold. In psychological terms, loneliness is the alchemical fire that burns away dependence, leaving behind the gold of self-awareness. The more you endure it consciously, the more luminous your spirit becomes. When no one is there for you, life is not punishing you, it is inviting you to become someone who can stand alone. Jung understood that the soul does not evolve through comfort but through challenge. Solitude forces you to discover inner resources you never knew existed: resilience, intuition, creativity, and faith. You begin to understand that being alone does not mean being abandoned, it means being entrusted with the sacred work of self-discovery. This is the paradox of Jungian growth. The very absence you dread becomes the presence you need. The silence you fear becomes the voice that guides you, and the loneliness that once broke you becomes the doorway to your highest consciousness, the awakening of the self. Part 2. Shadow work, turning pain into power. When no one is there for you, the world forces you inward. You come face to face with the raw, unfiltered emotions that you've spent your entire life avoiding. Jung called this encounter the confrontation with the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche that contains everything you've denied, repressed, or refused to see about yourself. It's the emotional basement of the soul, filled with shame, anger, fear, envy, guilt, and desire. But within that darkness lies the very energy that can rebuild your life from the ground up. Shadow work at its core is the process of transforming pain into power. Most people mistake pain as an enemy. We numb it, run from it, or bury it under distraction. But pain is not a sign of weakness. It's a signal that something deeper within you is asking to be seen. Jung believed that what we repress doesn't disappear, it becomes unconscious and starts to control us from beneath the surface. The shadow doesn't vanish through avoidance. It grows stronger, feeding off our denial. When you finally stop running, you discover that the pain you've been escaping contains the exact information your soul has been trying to communicate. When you feel betrayed, abandoned, or invisible, that pain exposes your core wounds, the areas of the psyche that remain unhealed. These wounds are often linked to childhood experiences where love was conditional, attention was scarce, or emotions were dismissed. Jung described this as the fragmentation of the self. Part of you grows up, while another part stays frozen in that early pain. Shadow work is the act of going back to retrieve those lost parts, not to change the past, but to bring them into awareness and reintegrate them into the whole. Imagine your psyche as a vast house. The shadow lives in the rooms you've locked, pretending they don't exist. Every time you deny an emotion, anger, jealousy, grief, you add another lock to the door. Over the years, these rooms become haunted. The air grows heavy with unspoken memories, and then one day when life strips away your distractions, those doors creak open. The ghosts rush out, demanding to be acknowledged. That's when people say, "I'm falling apart." But what's actually happening is integration. The shadow doesn't destroy you, it's trying to make you whole. To face your shadow is to stop pretending. It's to admit that you are not always kind, not always strong, not always wise. It's to acknowledge the contradictions within you, the part that wants connection but also fears vulnerability, the part that seeks success but resents responsibility, the part that loves deeply but carries hidden resentment. Jung taught that wholeness is not about perfection, it's about embracing the full range of human experience. Light without darkness is superficial. Strength without vulnerability is hollow. Love without shadow becomes codependence. When you start to observe your pain instead of reacting to it, you begin to understand its purpose. For instance, anger is not evil, it signals that a boundary has been violated. Jealousy reveals what you secretly desire but have been too ashamed to claim. Sadness exposes your capacity for depth and love. Even fear has a function, it protects what is sacred. Each emotion carries wisdom, but only if you stop judging it. Jung believed that repression turns emotion into poison, while conscious awareness transforms it into medicine. The process of shadow work begins with honesty. You must be willing to sit in the discomfort of your feelings without trying to fix them. That's the hardest part for most people. We've been conditioned to get over it, to distract ourselves, to stay positive. But positivity without authenticity is spiritual. Bypassing it keeps you stuck in denial. Jung often said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Real healing happens when you stop pretending that everything is fine and dare to feel what's real. There's a moment in everyone's life when the pain becomes too loud to ignore. Maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted. Maybe you've lost your job, your relationship, or your sense of identity. The surface breaks and suddenly everything you've buried surges upward. This eruption is not a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. The shadow is emerging not to punish you, but to free you. It's forcing you to confront the parts of yourself that have been living in exile. The shame, the rage, the insecurity, they all want to be seen, heard, and healed. When you allow yourself to feel pain fully, something miraculous happens. The emotion peaks then begins to dissolve. You realize that the feeling itself cannot destroy you, only your resistance to it can. Every tear shed consciously purifies the psyche. Every moment of raw honesty brings you closer to authenticity. Pain, when faced with awareness, becomes the fire that burns away illusion. It reveals what truly matters and what no longer does. In Jungian psychology, this confrontation is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing dialogue between the ego and the unconscious. The ego, your conscious sense of self, wants control. The unconscious, the vast field of forgotten memories and instincts, wants expression. Shadow work is the bridge between them. It's how you learn to coexist with your inner chaos instead of being ruled by it. The more you engage in this dialogue, the less fragmented you become. You start to see patterns, why you attract certain people, why you repeat certain mistakes, why you sabotage yourself when things get good. These patterns are not curses, they are clues. For example, you might notice that you often feel unappreciated in relationships. Beneath that lies an old belief, "I am not enough." That belief was likely formed in childhood when your emotions were dismissed or minimized. The shadow holds that memory. Every time someone overlooks you, the shadow replays that old pain, hoping you'll finally acknowledge it. The healing comes when you stop blaming others for triggering you and instead ask, "What is this pain trying to teach me about myself?" When you respond to pain with curiosity rather than judgment, transformation begins. The journey through the shadow is not linear. Some days you'll feel empowered and clear. Other days you'll feel lost, angry, or hopeless. That's normal. The psyche doesn't heal in straight lines. It moves in spirals. Each cycle brings you deeper into awareness. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable, then meaningful. You start to trust the process. You realize that every emotional storm carries a hidden treasure, a piece of your soul that was waiting to return. One of the greatest misconceptions about healing is that it makes you soft. In truth, it makes you strong in ways the world can't see. The person who has faced their shadow no longer fears their own emotions. They don't need to project blame or chase validation. Their peace is not fragile, it's rooted in self-knowledge. Jung believed that this inner stability is the foundation of true power. It's not dominance over others, but mastery over oneself. Turning pain into power doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending to be over it. It means using the energy behind your pain as fuel for growth. If anger once consumed you, you can channel it into assertiveness. If grief once paralyzed you, you can transform it into compassion. If rejection once broke you, you can use it to develop self-respect. Every emotion is energy. Shadow work teaches you to direct that energy consciously. That's how transformation happens, not by escaping your emotions, but by learning their language. Consider the metaphor of fire. Fire can destroy or illuminate depending on how you handle it. Pain is the same. When you repress it, it burns you from within. When you face it, it lights your way. Jung referred to this as the transmutation of psychic energy, the alchemical process of turning emotional lead into spiritual gold. The deeper the pain, the greater the potential for awakening. Those who have suffered profoundly often possess extraordinary depth, empathy, and creativity because they've touched the roots of their humanity. But shadow work demands courage. It asks you to revisit memories that make you cringe, to admit the ways you've contributed to your own suffering, to forgive yourself for what you didn't know then. Self-forgiveness is one of the most difficult yet liberating aspects of the process. Jung taught that guilt, when faced consciously, becomes a force for growth. It humbles the ego and opens the heart. When you forgive yourself, you stop identifying as the victim of your past and start identifying as the author of your present. One practical way to engage your shadow is through journaling. Writing down your raw, uncensored emotions allows the unconscious to speak. Don't edit, don't censor, just write. Another method is dream analysis. Jung viewed dreams as messages from the unconscious guiding the ego toward wholeness. Pay attention to recurring symbols or emotions in your dreams. They reveal what your shadow is trying to communicate. Lastly, notice your projections. The traits you criticize or admire in others often reflect parts of yourself you haven't fully accepted. The person who irritates you might be carrying your denied qualities. The person you idolize might represent your unrealized potential. Shadow work is not about self-condemnation, but self-integration. When you realize that every human being carries darkness, you develop compassion for yourself and others. You stop expecting perfection. You begin to see that even your flaws have function. Your sensitivity makes you perceptive. Your anger makes you protective. Your sadness makes you authentic. Wholeness is not achieved by eliminating imperfection, but by weaving it into the fabric of your being. There's a quiet power that comes from owning your shadow. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you understand yourself. You no longer seek constant reassurance because you trust your inner compass. The opinions of others lose their hold over you. That's when you become unshakable, not because life stops hurting, but because you've learned how to hold your pain without losing your center. Jung called this psychological integration, the moment when the conscious and unconscious work together in harmony. Many people look for someone to save them, but true salvation begins within. When you integrate your shadow, you stop waiting for external rescue. You realize that the love, validation, and stability you've been chasing outside can only come from inside. You become your own healer. You learn to parent the wounded child within you, to comfort it when it cries, to guide it when it's lost, to protect it when it feels unsafe. This inner parenting restores your sense of safety in the world. It's also important to understand that healing doesn't erase pain. It changes your relationship to it. You stop seeing pain as an enemy and start seeing it as a messenger. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this showing me about myself?" This shift in perception is the essence of empowerment. You reclaim authorship of your experience. You realize that even in suffering, you have agency, the power to choose awareness over avoidance, compassion over bitterness, growth over stagnation. In moments of deep loneliness or despair, remember that your shadow is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to wake you up. The energy trapped in your pain is sacred. When you honor it, you unlock creativity, intuition, and resilience you never imagined possible. You become capable of facing life with radical honesty. You no longer need to wear masks to be accepted because you've accepted yourself. That's when you begin to live from your center, grounded, authentic, and free. People who have integrated their shadows radiate a quiet confidence. They are not easily provoked because they've made peace with their inner chaos. They don't need to prove their worth because they know it intrinsically. They can love deeply without losing themselves because they no longer seek completion in another person. They understand that every human carries both light and dark, and that maturity means embracing both. The paradox of shadow work is that by descending into darkness, you rise into power. You stop being a victim of unconscious forces and start becoming a conscious creator of your life. Your pain becomes your teacher, your past becomes your wisdom, and your shadow becomes your strength. You realize that nothing you've gone through was wasted. Every wound prepared you for the person you were meant to become. And when you reach that level of awareness, loneliness no longer feels like a punishment. It becomes a sanctuary, a sacred space where you can meet yourself fully without fear or pretense. In that stillness, you realize that your greatest power was never outside you. It was buried in the very darkness you once tried to escape. Part 3. The Inner Father and Mother Archetypes. When no one is there to guide you, the world becomes your mirror. Every challenge, every disappointment, every silence you encounter is a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. Jung believed that within each of us live two great internal forces, the inner father and the inner mother. These archetypes are not literal parents but psychological patterns that shape how we discipline, comfort, protect, and nurture ourselves. When you feel abandoned or unsupported, it's often because these inner figures are undeveloped or in conflict. Learning to awaken and harmonize them is one of the most profound steps in personal transformation. From childhood, we absorb emotional models of what love, authority, and safety mean. Our parents, for better or worse, become the first gods of our inner world. Through them, we learn how to treat ourselves. If they were warm and attentive, we may internalize compassion. If they were distant or critical, we may inherit self-doubt and shame. Jung saw this as the process by which the psyche forms internal archetypes, not copies of our actual parents, but energetic blueprints that influence how we navigate life. Healing, therefore, requires going beyond our childhood conditioning and consciously reshaping these archetypes within us. The inner father archetype represents direction, structure, and responsibility. It's the voice inside that says, "Stand up, keep going. You can handle this." It teaches us to create order out of chaos, to think logically, and to build discipline. But when this energy is wounded, it manifests as self-criticism, harsh perfectionism, or emotional rigidity. A person with an unbalanced inner father might push themselves relentlessly, equating worth with achievement, or they may lack boundaries altogether, drifting without focus or self-respect. The goal isn't to suppress or exalt this energy, it's to humanize it. The inner mother archetype, on the other hand, represents care, empathy, intuition, and nourishment. It's the energy that whispers rest, feel, forgive yourself. It connects us to the body, to feelings, and to creativity. But when this energy is distorted, it can lead to dependency, emotional indulgence, or avoidance of responsibility. A wounded inner mother might overprotect you from growth or encourage you to stay in situations that feel familiar, but stifle your evolution. True maturity lies in learning to let both energies, the inner father and the inner mother, work in harmony rather than opposition. In moments of isolation, these two archetypes reveal their state. When you are alone, who speaks louder, the voice that pushes or the one that soothes? If you're consumed by guilt for resting, your inner father dominates. If you procrastinate endlessly or drown in self-pity, your inner mother is unchecked. The art of self-mastery is learning when to invoke one and when to balance with the other. The father teaches discipline, the mother teaches compassion. Together they create wholeness. Jung often spoke of the necessity of internal polarity, that the human psyche is built upon complementary opposites, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine reason, and feeling light and shadow. Psychological health doesn't come from erasing one pole, but from holding both with awareness. The same applies to these inner parents. The father without the mother becomes tyrannical. The mother without the father becomes chaotic. In their union, the psyche finds stability, purpose, and love. To develop the inner father, one must begin by defining what healthy authority means. Many people equate authority with control, but true inner authority is the ability to direct your energy consciously. It's knowing when to act, when to pause, and how to maintain integrity under pressure. When no one is cheering you on, the inner father becomes your mentor, the one who believes in your potential even when the world is silent. This energy helps you to make commitments, set boundaries, and pursue your goals with consistency. Developing this energy doesn't mean becoming emotionally detached. A mature inner father leads with clarity, not coldness. He encourages accountability without shame. He says, "You made a mistake. Now learn and do better," instead of, "You're worthless." Many people internalize a punishing father, the echo of parental criticism that keeps them paralyzed by fear of failure. To heal, you must replace that punitive voice with a wise one, a father who holds you to high standards but never withdraws love. This reparenting is psychological alchemy, transforming judgment into guidance, turning fear into confidence. To awaken the inner mother, you must learn the language of emotional safety. She is the part of you that knows how to comfort pain without numbing it. When life feels unbearable, she invites you to breathe, to cry, to rest. She teaches you that tenderness is not weakness. In a culture obsessed with productivity and toughness, the inner mother reminds you that healing happens through acceptance, not force. But she also needs boundaries. Without the father's structure, her compassion can turn into enabling. Without her softness, the father's structure turns into cruelty. Both need each other to stay whole. One practical way to activate these archetypes is through self-dialogue. Imagine the father and mother within you as two voices in conversation. When you face a difficult choice, listen to what each one says. The father might advise, "Stay focused, don't give up." The mother might whisper, "Be gentle with yourself, you're doing your best." The goal isn't to silence one, but to integrate both into a single balanced decision. Over time, this dialogue becomes internalized. You develop what Jung called inner guidance, a direct communication between the ego and the archetypal wisdom of the psyche. In loneliness, this internal balance becomes your anchor. The absence of external support forces you to rely on these inner parents. When your outer world gives no validation, your inner father provides direction. When no one comforts you, your inner mother embraces you. You realize that what you sought from others was never beyond your reach, it was waiting to be cultivated within. This realization is profoundly empowering. It marks the shift from emotional dependency to inner sovereignty. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming psychologically parented from within. That means you no longer live according to the unfinished business of your family story. You stop reenacting the same emotional patterns that kept you small. You begin to choose your own values, your own voice, your own rhythm. The father archetype gives you the courage to break old cycles. The mother archetype gives you the grace to forgive the people who shaped them. Together they free you from the ancestral shadows that once defined your identity. Many people, especially those who grew up in chaotic or neglectful environments, have never experienced what healthy parental energy feels like. They may crave love, but fear intimacy, desire success, but fear failure. Their inner parents are fragmented, one overly dominant, the other absent. Shadow work exposes these imbalances. You start to recognize how your current struggles mirror the dynamics of your upbringing. If your father was critical, you might sabotage success to avoid inner shame. If your mother was anxious, you might overextend yourself to keep others calm. Awareness is the first act of liberation. Once you see the pattern, you can choose differently. To embody the healthy inner father, practice consistency. Keep promises to yourself. Wake up when you say you will. Follow through on your goals. This builds trust within your psyche, the same trust a child feels toward a dependable parent. The more consistent you are, the safer your inner child feels to express creativity and vulnerability. Discipline becomes love in action, proof that you're worthy of reliability, not punishment. To embody the healthy inner mother, practice compassion. When you fail, instead of scolding yourself, offer understanding. When you're tired, rest without guilt. When you're hurting, comfort yourself as you would a beloved friend. This nurtures emotional security, the foundation of all growth. Jung believed that self-love is not narcissism, but the restoration of psychic balance. You cannot offer authentic care to others if your own inner mother is starving. When these archetypes mature, something extraordinary happens. They give birth to the self. The self, in Jung's framework, is the totality of the psyche, the union of opposites. It's the part of you that transcends gender, culture, and conditioning. When your inner father and mother unite in balance, you experience inner wholeness. Decisions come from clarity instead of impulse. Boundaries become natural instead of forced. You stop oscillating between self-criticism and self-indulgence. Instead, you live from the center, firm yet flexible, strong yet kind. Consider how this balance appears in daily life. A healthy inner father helps you face rejection without collapsing. He reminds you that your worth is not negotiable. A healthy inner mother helps you process that pain with gentleness. She encourages you to grieve, not suppress. Together they transform heartbreak into wisdom. They guide you to take responsibility without self-blame and to forgive without losing discernment. This is what maturity looks like: emotional intelligence rooted in integration, not reaction. In solitude, you begin to see how these inner archetypes influence every relationship you have. If your inner father is weak, you might tolerate disrespect. If your inner mother is suppressed, you might struggle to express affection. Every external conflict mirrors an internal imbalance. The people who trigger you are not your enemies, they're messengers showing you where your inner parents need healing. This realization shifts you from blame to awareness, from victimhood to empowerment. When the inner father speaks with strength and the inner mother responds with empathy, your inner dialogue becomes harmonious. You stop swinging between extremes, between overwork and exhaustion, between stoicism and breakdown. You find rhythm. This rhythm is what Jung called psychic equilibrium. It doesn't mean life stops challenging you. It means your response to it becomes rooted, wise, and self-sustaining. There's a quiet dignity that arises when you parent yourself well. You stop chasing external validation because you've built it internally. You trust your instincts without needing constant reassurance. You treat yourself with respect even when no one's watching. This inner stability radiates outward. People sense it, the calm authority of someone who no longer seeks rescue, the warmth of someone who has learned to nurture their own soul. You become both the protector and the nurturer, both the leader and the healer. Jung often compared psychological development to spiritual birth. Just as physical birth requires separation from the mother, spiritual birth requires separation from dependency, the willingness to stand on your own inner ground. But this independence doesn't mean isolation. It means wholeness. When your inner father and mother unite, you carry your own home within you. You no longer wander the world looking for someone to complete you because you've found completion within. This balance also redefines your relationship with others. Instead of seeking partners to heal your parental wounds, you attract equals who reflect your integration. Instead of demanding love to fill your emptiness, you share love from fullness. The father archetype helps you maintain integrity. The mother archetype helps you remain open. Together they teach you how to love without losing yourself, the ultimate expression of individuation. Loneliness becomes less of a void and more of a classroom. Every silence invites a deeper conversation with your inner world. Every disappointment tests the strength of your inner father. Every heartbreak awakens the compassion of your inner mother. Through this ongoing dialogue, you evolve from being a wounded child of circumstance to a conscious adult of destiny. You are no longer merely reacting to life. You are participating in your own psychological creation. The integration of these archetypes is not perfection, it's balance. Some days your inner father will falter, other days your inner mother will. What matters is awareness. Awareness is the bridge between chaos and order. Every time you choose awareness over reactivity, you strengthen both energies. Over time, your inner parents stop being separate voices and become a unified guidance system, a wise, calm authority that feels both firm and kind. When the world fails to show up for you, these inner figures will. The father will remind you of your direction. The mother will remind you of your worth. Together they will help you rise, not as a reaction to pain, but as a conscious act of creation. And in that rise you will discover the true meaning of self-reliance, not isolation but integration. Part 4. Individuation, becoming the person no one believed you could be. There comes a point in everyone's life when silence replaces applause. When the world stops believing in you, when the people you once depended on walk away, and when all that's left is the question, who am I now? According to Carl Jung, that question marks the beginning of individuation, the sacred journey of becoming who you were always meant to be, even when no one else can see it yet. Individuation is not about improvement, it's about revelation. It's not about changing into someone new, but uncovering the authentic self that has been buried under layers of expectation, fear, and imitation. Most people live in the prison of the persona, the mask they wear to be accepted. They build lives around the illusion of belonging, suppressing the parts of themselves that don't fit. But when life isolates you, when everything you depended on collapses, that mask begins to crack. What feels like destruction is actually initiation. The moment you lose external validation, you are forced to find internal truth. Jung believed that every breakdown of identity is an invitation from the self, the central organizing force of the psyche, to emerge. The ego, which once ruled your life, begins to lose its power, and something deeper starts to take control. This is not a comfortable process. Individuation demands confrontation with your fears, your contradictions, and your forgotten dreams. It's psychological rebirth through inner fire. In the early stages, individuation feels like chaos. You question everything, your values, your beliefs, your relationships, even your sanity. You realize that much of what you called you was borrowed, inherited from parents, culture, religion, or trauma. Stripped of those identities, you feel naked before existence. But this nakedness is necessary. Jung compared it to the alchemical stage of nigredo, the blackening, when all that is false burns away, making space for transformation. During this phase, the world may see you as lost, rebellious, or unrealistic. People might say, "You've changed." And they'll be right, but what they don't understand is that you're finally becoming real. Jung taught that individuation often alienates us from the collective because authenticity threatens conformity. To live authentically means to no longer play by the rules of fear. It means to risk misunderstanding in order to live in truth. This is the price of freedom, to walk alone for a time, until the self becomes your companion. Every great transformation begins in solitude. When there's no one to guide you, you begin to listen differently. The voice of the self, quiet but unmistakable, starts to whisper through intuition, dreams, and synchronicities. It might urge you to leave a job that kills your soul, to forgive someone who hurt you, or to start creating in ways that terrify you. At first, these impulses feel irrational, but Jung believed they are the language of the unconscious guiding you toward wholeness. Individuation requires faith in that voice. Faith not in what you can see, but in what you can feel, calling from within. To become who you truly are, you must let die what you no longer are. This is the part that breaks most people, the death of the false self. You lose relationships that thrived on your compliance. You outgrow environments that once felt like home. The more authentic you become, the fewer places you fit in, but the more at peace you feel wherever you are. Jung warned that many resist this stage, choosing comfort over authenticity. But to resist individuation is to betray your soul. The pain of staying small eventually outweighs the fear of expansion. The key to surviving this transformation is awareness. Every emotion that arises, confusion, anger, grief, carries information. The anger shows you where you've been suppressed. The grief shows you what you've outgrown. The fear shows you where you're being reborn. Each feeling is a torch guiding you through the darkness of becoming. When you learn to feel without collapsing, to observe without judgment, you begin to master your psyche. This mastery is not control, it's cooperation. You stop fighting your inner world and start collaborating with it. In individuation, the shadow becomes your ally. All the traits you once condemned in yourself, the ambition, the sensuality, the rage, the wildness, begin to return, not as threats but as sources of energy. Jung saw the shadow as raw potential waiting to be integrated. Every time you embrace a rejected part of yourself, you reclaim power. You stop hiding behind virtue and start living with vitality. The person who integrates their shadow becomes magnetic, not because they seek attention, but because they radiate authenticity. As you move deeper, another dimension of individuation unfolds, the encounter with the anima or animus, the inner opposite gender of the psyche. For a man, this is the anima, the feminine aspect representing feeling, intuition, and imagination. For a woman, it's the animus, the masculine principle of intellect, will, and clarity. Integrating these energies creates psychological balance. It allows you to act without losing empathy, to feel without losing reason. Jung believed that individuation is incomplete until these inner opposites find union, the sacred marriage of the psyche. This inner union manifests as outer alignment. You stop chasing relationships to fill voids because you've married your own soul. You no longer seek approval because you've accepted your inner truth. You no longer beg for love because you've become love in form. Individuation turns dependency into wholeness. It teaches you that the greatest companionship is with your own self, that divine intelligence within you that knows exactly where you're meant to go. But make no mistake, this path is not for the faint of heart. The self demands everything. It will dismantle your illusions, test your patience, and strip away your attachments. You will lose versions of yourself you thought you needed to survive. Yet in their place will rise someone stronger, clearer, freer, someone unrecognizable to your old world, but unmistakable to your soul. That is the paradox of individuation. To find yourself, you must first lose everything that isn't you. You will know you are evolving when solitude stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like sanctuary, when silence no longer scares you but nourishes you, when you begin to prefer truth over comfort, alignment over approval. The person you are becoming will demand new habits, new boundaries, new courage. You will start to speak differently, walk differently, think differently, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you've outgrown the need to pretend. One of Jung's most profound insights was that individuation is not selfish, it's service. When you become whole, you become a light for others. The more authentic you are, the more permission you give others to do the same. The most powerful contribution you can make to the world is your own transformation. People who live from the self don't preach. They embody. Their presence heals without words. Their peace inspires without effort. They carry a quiet authority that comes from alignment, not ego. There will be days when you doubt yourself, days when you question if the journey is worth it, when you look around and see others following easier paths, getting quicker rewards, and you'll wonder if you've made a mistake. But that's just the ego longing for old certainties. The self doesn't deal in shortcuts. It asks for depth, not speed. Jung said there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Every test you face is refining you, carving you into someone capable of carrying greater truth. As you integrate, life begins to mirror your inner growth. Synchronicities, those mysterious coincidences Jung wrote about, start appearing. You'll meet the right people at the right time, stumble upon messages that echo your inner state, and realize that the universe is communicating with you through subtle language. You are no longer a victim of chance. You are a participant in meaning. This alignment between inner and outer reality is the mark of individuation fulfilled. The world begins to respond to who you are, not who you pretend to be. Individuation also transforms how you handle pain. You no longer see challenges as punishments, but as invitations to expand consciousness. Every heartbreak becomes a teacher. Every loss becomes a doorway. Instead of asking, why me, you begin to ask, what is this trying to awaken in me? That shift from victimhood to curiosity is liberation. It's the moment you step out of fate and into freedom. Jung called this living symbolically, perceiving life not as random suffering, but as meaningful unfolding. The greatest proof of individuation is peace, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose. You realize that your path was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be yours. Even your loneliness, your failures, your betrayals, all of them were teachers sculpting your soul into strength. What once broke you now builds you. The self turns wounds into wisdom, fear into faith, pain into prophecy. You become both the student and the lesson, both the seeker and the revelation. Eventually, you begin to see what Jung meant when he said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who the world wanted, not who fear allowed, but who the soul intended. You realize that the person you've been chasing was always inside you, waiting for you to remember. And that's the beauty of individuation. You don't find yourself by becoming someone else. You find yourself by coming home. Becoming the person no one believed you could be means breaking the contract with doubt. It means refusing to live smaller so others feel comfortable. It means rising even when you're invisible, trusting that one day your authenticity will speak louder than your explanations. Jung often said that people will call you crazy when you start listening to your soul, but that's only because they can't hear theirs yet. Stay loyal to your calling, even if the world misunderstands it. Every great spirit in history has walked this same lonely road to freedom. At a certain point you will look back and see that everything made sense, every betrayal, every silence, every ending. The darkness was never the enemy. It was the womb of your rebirth. You will recognize that being alone was the divine plan to reconnect you to yourself. You will see that the person you became, resilient, conscious, whole, could never have been born without that solitude. That realization is the essence of individuation, to thank the pain for shaping your greatness. Individuation doesn't promise happiness. It promises authenticity. And authenticity brings a kind of peace that no external success can provide, the peace of living in truth. When you reach that place, the opinions of others lose weight. Their doubt becomes irrelevant. Their absence becomes freedom, because now you have something they can't give or take away: yourself. And that self, the one who rose from rejection, who turned loneliness into wisdom, who became light after walking through shadow, is the person no one believed you could be. But you did. You believed when no one else could see. You stood when no one else clapped. You healed without applause. And that quiet victory, unseen by the world, but witnessed by your soul, is the most sacred triumph of all. The day you stop waiting for someone to save you is the day you become unstoppable. You were never meant to fit in, you were meant to awaken.